After being in the can for more than 2 years, Red Sonja finally lands US distribution, and one that confirms all the fears everyone paying attention ever had. Let's see why. In the afternoon of March 26th, Deadline Hollywood claimed to break the exclusive scoop that Red Sonja had finally landed US distribution. It wasn't that exclusive though, as Bloody Disgusting covered the exact same story several hours before them, only their angle was that the movie had been rated R, while they buried the lead on the distribution situation, although it is covered in the story. Red Sonja will be distributed by Samuel Goldwyn Films, the distributor of foreign and independent films, many of which have a genre bent, which is cool. Browsing through their catalog, there are some very cool movies in there, but what is missing is any franchises of any serious note, as that may be beyond the means of Samuel Goldwyn Films, and that in turn suggests that Red Sonja has now pulled a Solomon Kane, as we for a long time feared that it would. To get any newcomers up to speed on exactly what I mean by pulling a Solomon Kane, let's rewatch this segment from when Red Sonja landed distribution in the UK with a similar cool but smaller label. Solomon Kane is a criminally underrated 2009 sword and sorcery feature film based on the Robert E. Howard character starring James Purefoy, also directed by M.J. Bassett, the director of this very Red Sonja. Since Solomon Kane was made so soon after Batman Begins and Casino Royale, the producers of the time demanded the story be an origin story, just like those, and not an adaptation of any of the original Robert E. Howard Solomon Kane stories. Those would be saved for the sequels, as the first movie was an intended trilogy starter. Bassett was able to work with this and crafted a wonderful origin story that perfectly set up adaptations of Howard's original stories later to come. Alas, it is one of the great tragedies of cinema that the sequels never happened. So why didn't they, when the first movie clearly delivered, at least from a creative point of view? Well, that is entirely down to the business and politics side of things, and more specifically, the distribution side of things. Solomon Kane was made outside of the studio system. For all intents and purposes, it was an independent film, and a foreign independent film at that, as it was made by French indie production company Davis Films, in conjunction with the film division of book publisher Wandering Star. If they had been able to sell Solomon Kane to one of the major US distributors, like how Davis Films were able to sell their earlier 2006 movie Silent Hill to Sony, there would have been no issue, or at the very least, less of an issue, as then there would be a major US release that all other various international distributors could siphon off on and recycle the promotional material from. Case in point, Silent Hill was released by a number of different distributors around the world, yet they all recycle the trailers, posters, and other promotional material that Sony made for the US release, as everyone else built their local release on the far grander US release. Alas, that never happened for Solomon Kane. It sat on the shelf in a completed state for years, while the producers desperately tried to sell it to one of the major US distributors, but alas, none were interested. In the end, the production company couldn't wait any longer and had to release it without any US distribution. That meant the international distribution which already was on board, namely the French and UK distribution. Both had to create their own marketing material and treat it as a lesser local film, without that huge boost of US distribution. Then all the other international distributors saw it as little more than an indie direct-to-video movie, which is how they treated it and the only price they paid for it. When Solomon Kane eventually, and much later, was picked up for release in the US, it was given the direct-to-video release strategy there as well, treated as a lesser independent foreign film. Which technically it was, although it presented as a major studio film, because that is what it was created to be. But alas, the distribution side of things just never facilitated that happening. Then it didn't help that Solomon Kane was far better than a lot of movies from the other major distributors. They never picked it up. And so, just like Dread a few years later, it was screwed, doomed to indie circles of release hell. Circling back to Red Sonja, the situation is pretty much exactly the same. The movie is made by Millennium, for all intents and purposes a foreign indie company. That a UK distributor, and an indie UK distributor at that, now being announced as the first distributor, suggests that history has repeated itself all over again, and this Red Sonja is likely to go the way of Solomon Kane. And returning to current events, now that Samuel Goldwyn Films has been confirmed as the US distributor, that only further confirms that Red Sonja is indeed going the way of Solomon Kane, that is, heading toward a one-and-done deal. We don't know how much they had to pay Millennium for the domestic distribution rights, but with the movie having collected dust on the shelves for 2 years, I can only imagine it was a steal. So unless Millennium tremendously underreported the movie's production cost, or have some other way of making money on this that we're not aware, sequel prospects are by any conventional metric slim to none right now, simply because of the distribution situation. Case in point, the distributor told Deadline Hollywood, "We're thrilled to be bringing Red Sonja to audiences across the nation. The fan base for the legendary character is big and passionate, and we're confident that this film will deliver for them," said SGF president Peter Goldwyn. That is cool, and I like what he's saying. He wants the fans to like this. Too often the fans have been neglected. That being said, while the Red Sonja fanbase is passionate, it is in fact not that big. So if he only wants to bring in the fans, then they must have gotten the movie for a pittance. What he should be saying is that not only will the movie please the fans, they'll make sure everyone else sees why the fans are so passionate. But I don't think aiming too wide is a priority here. Without a major US distributor to lead the worldwide marketing campaign and give this the blockbuster treatment, this is simply a case of too many cooks in the worldwide kitchen that won't pool or synergize their resources, meaning this may get a somewhat wide release in some markets, but most likely we're looking at an indie scale or even direct to local no-name streamer release in most markets. That rarely leads to sequels. So why did this happen? Why didn't any bigger distributors want this? My hunch remains that being in development for more than a decade, they still ended up making the movie too soon. You see, while it was in development, they were worried about the male gaze and offending woke sensibilities. And while the initially conceptualized wokeness was toned down for the filmed version, the culture nonetheless changed while the movie was in production, as the audience had turned on girl bosses in all their forms by the time this was in the can. So ironically, the male gaze and everything else problematic is what would have been needed to overcome this audience and therefore distributor skepticism. But that's not the movie they made, so here they are. That at least is my read of the situation. On the bright side though, we now know the movie will be coming, from where, and that it will be rated R. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.